to get into our main presentation.
Okay, Brooke, thank you very much, and good day to everybody. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Brooke, you were kind of breaking in and out. I don't know if that was on my end or yours.
Oh, really? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. All right, so let's get going here this afternoon. Okay, what we're going to talk about is distribution, manufacturing, automatic accounting instructions, a topic that I'm sure is near and dear to everybody's heart. What areas we're going to cover, I'll show you a little bit or tell you about how DMAAI is just give you a quick overview of that. Then we'll talk about the use of wildcard. There's some documentation that you guys can get once you get a whole slide deck that covers the programs, the DMAAI tables, you know, the inventory adjustment program, what the program number is, what DMAAIs they invoke, what they mean, that type of thing. Now, we won't cover them in great detail, but I wanted to give you an overview and again, provide reference materials for you going forward. Then we're going to talk about line type considerations. Now, line types come into play when we are discussing sales orders and purchase orders. So if you're familiar, some of the more common line types you might run across are S for stock items, J for purchase to an account, things of that nature. GL class codes and DMAAIs are both impacted by that, so I wanted to go over that with you as well. And finally, give you some tips and tricks of what I've learned over the years and how to best approach configuring DMAAIs and actually testing them out. Okay, so how DMAAIs work. So we're out in the factory or in the DC and we need to move inventory. We're going to pick some for shipping. We're putting some away, those type of transactions. We need to record inventory movements on our general ledger. So we're out there doing all these inventory movements. We're doing transactions within the JD Edwards system. Somehow, we need to create a corresponding journal entry so that the dollars show up on our financial statements correctly. So how is that done? Well, that's where the DMAAIs come into play. What they are is they are the roadmap between your inventory transactions and the general ledger. And they determine for each transaction type and document type that you use, what accounts are invoked for the debits and credits for those transaction types. So, for example, let's say I'm doing it just a simple IA inventory adjustment. I'm adjusting some units onto the shelf. We are invoking behind the scenes program P4114. So that program, what JD Edwards has done is they've programmed it to use specific DMAAI tables. So an inventory adjustment will call 4122 for the inventory side of the entry and 4124 for the expense. So an inventory adjustment, what we're trying to do is we need to debit an inventory account, credit an expense account. And those are the type of GL entries that are made. So here's where the DMAAIs come into play. You get a little bit of a view here of what the screen looks like inside of JD Edwards, where we have our company number that we're transacting in, the document type that we're using, the GL class code for the item that's being transacted, and then consequently the account that's going to be used for the journal entry. Okay, so a quick setup overview. For those of you who have FastPath capability, you can just type DMAAI to get to the screen that you see here. And for those of you who are report writers and can get at the raw data, it is stored in table F4095. So here's an example of the screen when you FastPath DMAAI. Here's what you get. it comes up. You can skip to the AAI table that you want. And notice there are dozens and dozens of DMAAI tables. How do you know which one you want? Well, that's where education comes to play. There's no magic formula for this. It's just learning where they are and what programs use what DMAAIs. Okay. Now, what's important to know is when we go ahead and configure this, and we put in our company zero or our specific company numbers and geoclass and account numbers, that when you type the account number in, the branch plant, the object, the subsidiary, that these accounts are not validated against the account master. So you could type in anything you want in these fields and the screen will accept it. However, when you try to do the transaction, if the account is not valid, then you will have errors. So yes, you can type in anything. No, you don't want to. Now, the reason that JD Edwards does this is because they have functionality behind the scenes with DMAAIs, something called flex accounting. So with flex accounting, you intentionally leave things blank, and there's other programming behind the scenes that will dynamically fill in, let's say, which branch or subsidiary that you're using. Now, the key to entering this information, you see, is company, doc type, and geoclass. And what that means is I cannot have duplicates. Each combination of company, doc type, and geoclass code must be unique in order to be entered into the system. So I can't have a transaction saying I want the inventory here, and then, oh, have a second choice, and I want it here. That doesn't work. We have to make up our mind where we want the entry to go, and those are the accounts that we put in. Okay, let's talk about the use of wildcards. Now, you guys probably haven't heard the term wildcard before. It's something that I've used for years and years, and it refers to the company zero and the 4 asterisks. So what happens is, JD Edwards, when the transaction takes place and DMAAIs are invoked, when it starts doing the lookup, it's going to look for specific company, doc type, and geoclass code combinations. And if it can't find it, then if you have company zero entries or the 4 asterisk entries, it will use those instead. So there's a hierarchy to this. So I'm going to give you an illustration of what I mean by a hierarchy. So let's say we're doing that inventory adjustment and we are in company 100. We are adjusting an item that has a geoclass of IN20. So the first thing that's going to happen is the program's going to go out and it says, can I find in my DMAAI table in 4122 and 4124, can I find an entry specifically for company 100 and specifically for geoclass IN20? If I find that, that's the one I need to use. So that is an exact match. If it doesn't find it, it just does an error. It goes to the next step. And the next step says, if I can't find a precise match, can I find something where the geoclass code is the asterisk and the company number is an exact match of 100? Now, if it finds that, of course, it will use that. But if not, it goes on to the next step and says, can I find an entry now with an exact match on the geoclass code, but I use the wildcard company 0? So company 0 means I don't care what company I'm in. If the geoclass is IN20, this is the entry I want you to use. And then finally, if it can't find any of those 3, it says, do I have an entry that has the 4 asterisks and company 0? That covers everything. So worst case scenario, if you do have this entry, that will cover all the errors. You will not get any errors with those entries. If you do not have the entry and it can't find any of 4, then that's when you start seeing error messages on your screens for interactive transactions, and you'll see errors on your batch job reports if the DMAAIs are not set up, or if it can't find a way to book the journal entry, your error messages will start displaying. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to launch a poll question, and you can see the question here, and I'm going to give a minute or so for people to chime in, but it's for an inventory adjustment transaction. Let's assume we're in company 1 with an item with a IN20 geoclass code. which one of the DMAAIs will be used. So if you go into your poll question, you should be able to see it. You should be able to select an answer. Okay, so I'll just give you guys a minute. Just click on what you think the answer might be, and then we'll move forward. Okay, I can see some results coming in. Okay, I'll give it about, another 10, 15 seconds or so. Okay, let me close it now. Okay, we look like we have a 50-50 response between number 2 and number 3. So let's see what the actual answer is. So our answer is going to be number 3. So half of you got it right. So let's think about this. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to look for an exact match. So do we see anything in our entries here that has company 1 and IN 20? And the answer is no. So then the second criteria is, do we have something with an exact match in the company, but asterisk in the GL class? And that's the one right there. So that it would be the correct response. Okay, now remember in the beginning, I told you that I would be providing some information. Again, it looks busy, it is busy. We're not gonna go through everything in great detail here, but I do wanna give you an overview of how these transactions work, and I'll give you a couple interesting pieces of information as well. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna look at inventory transactions. And you might say, well, doesn't that cover everything? But when we think about it, there are 4 modules inside of JD Edwards that actually touch inventory. So we have sales orders. We ship confirm against sales orders. We do purchase order receipts. We do work orders against, for manufacturing, where we produce items and we consume items. So those 3 modules touch the inventory system, as well as straight up inventory transactions, which are typically the issues, the adjustments, the IT transfers, the reclassifications, the cycle counts, those type of things. Now, each one of those modules has what's called a system code attached to it. So you can see in the description or in the title of the slide here, I put inventory 41. The 41 is called the system code. And all of the different systems in JD Edwards has this code associated with it. Now, why is that such a big deal? Well, what you'll find is that if you know the system codes, a lot of things will start to make sense to you, such as if you are using JD Edwards vanilla menus and you want to go to the inventory system, you could fast path G41. That will get you to the inventory main menu. To get to the sales main menu, you would fast path G42. Purchasing is G43. So these codes start to matter. Now the programs for inventory issues, adjustments, transfers, you'll notice that they all start with P for program, and then the next 2 characters represent the module. So anything that starts with P41 is an inventory program. Anything that starts with P42 is a sales order program, so on and so forth. You start to get it. With DMAAIs, the DMAAI tables are numbered, and the numbers start with the system code. So a 41 is an inventory DMAAI. Okay, and you'll see that as we get on the next few slides. But notice now that I have the different types of transactions that are inventory transactions, issues, transfers, adjustments, and reclasses. These are the AAIs, all 4 of these, that can be called by any of these transaction types. That's why they're all within the group. Okay, so here's the program number, here's what the program description is. So a P4112 is the inventory issue program. Here's the standard doc type, the typical doc type that's used, and it can call 41, 22, 24, 26, and 28. And here's a description of what each one of those are. So the main two are 41, 22, 24. If it invokes a zero balance adjustment, it will call 26 and 28 for the dollars on the zero balance adjustment. Okay, so that's how this is read. In 4141, it's for a transfer only. And you can see there's a standard cost variance that if you're doing an IT between branch plants and the branch plants have different costs, then the cost difference will be booked using 4141. Okay, so that's how this is read. And again, you can have a copy of the slide deck so you can use this for reference information. So group 2, notice everything's 41 still. Quantity revisions, branch revisions, batch costs generate the IB. Those are the DMAAI tables that are used for the IB transaction. Here's your cycle counts, tag counts, future cost updates. So that pretty much covers the inventory. Now this may not be everyone, but it is the vast majority of the most common DMAAIs that are used. Now we'll move along. We see we have purchasing here. Purchasing is system code 43. Here are the programs. They start with 43. Here are the DMAAIs. They start with 43. And you do have, here's an exception that starts with 44. I'm not quite sure why that is, but these AAIs will get invoked or could get invoked by the purchase receipt program. Okay, so same type of thing before. Here's your OV receipt. These are the DMAAIs that could get invoked. We have voucher matching. And then here's group 3 here. This has to do with taxes and landed costs. There are separate DMAAIs for those. Okay. Sales order. The DMAAIs are invoked during the sales update process. So this is actually batch, right? So sales update runs at night. It generates journal entries. It needs to invoke the DMAAIs. Here's where the DMAAIs are and what they mean. And then finally, purchasing, you'll see, manufacturing, you'll see 3132. The accounting gets generated by the manufacturing accounting program and the variance accounting program. So here are all the different DMAAIs associated with those. Again, you can get a copy of the slide deck and have this for reference. Okay, so my second poll question, which system code is represented by the number 42? So it was on the previous 4 slides. It was certainly on there, and I did mention it a few times, so let's see who was paying attention. Those numbers, there's a UDC table inside of JD Edwards that if you go to it, it will list all of the different system codes. It's interesting. There are dozens and dozens of them, but I've been working in the distribution area for a little over 20 years. I know probably about 12 of them, and those are the 12 that I use all the time. Okay, these are obviously the ones I use most often, so it's good to know these. Okay, so we will give this another few seconds. A lot of you have chimed in already, and it looks like I have a very intelligent crowd with me. All right, let me close this one up. And boy, I guess my question was just way too easy because everybody got this correct. Okay, yep, it's sales, and you can see the different codes that are associated with the different modules here. So very good. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about line types. Now, line types come into play, again, on purchase orders and sales orders. There's no such thing as a line type on a work order. Okay, some of the more common line types you'll run across are the S for stock, that's used a lot. A J for purchase to an account, that's used a lot. C for credit is used, you can see that one here. This screenshot that you're looking at is just the first few that are in a much bigger list okay? But it's enough to illustrate what I want to illustrate here. So what we're looking at is the line type setup screen. Okay, so behind the scenes, that line type is more than just the letter. It has functionality. And here is where you can configure the functionality for each of the different line types. Okay, now, one of the first things that I want you to look at is this column right here. And that, what that means is that's the inventory interface, whether we want this turned on or off. So there are different values associated here. So we can see on this screen Y's, B's, and N's. Okay, there's also a D that can be in here as well. Okay, so in the chart below, we can see what each of the interface codes are and what they mean and where the GL class code comes from, right? So if I have a sales order, and on that sales order, I'm doing a sales credit, and I type in an item and I type line type C on that sales order, the inventory interface is set to yes. The yes means that I'm going to default in the GL class code used to create the journal entries from the item location file. So the sales order has a location on it. It's going to go to that location and get the GL class code from there. Okay. A lot of inventory transactions work that way. All of the purchasing receipts will get it from the item location. The inventory transactions, the issues, adjustments, and transfers, you have to specify a branch and location. So it's the location file is where the GL class code comes from. Now, if you use this C line type with the interface of Y, that means that when I actually transact against that sales order line, not only am I going to know which journal entries to create, but it's also going to create Cardex records, and it's going to change quantity on hand for that item. That's what the inventory interface of yes means, that this is a full-blown inventory transaction. I have parts, I'm going to receive them in, ship them out, I need Cardex records, I need quantity changes. Okay. If you have a line type, and let's say we're using, oh, I hate using that. Let's just say, we'll use BF for an example. And the inventory interface is set to no. Then where will the GL class code come from? Because when it's set to no now, it's not going to validate the item against the item master. It's not going to create Cardex transactions. It's not going to change on-hand quantity for anything, because this line type is deemed as non-stock. So that's why it's an N. Okay. Now, when I have an N or I have an A, okay, the GL class code is going to come right from the line type setup. Okay. So if I'm using this BF, it's going to default the GL class code for FT60. Now that FT60 has to be set up in my DMAAIs in order for it not to error. Okay. So again, the inventory interface and the line type setup is a big player in determining which GL class code is used. So a lot of times what I've seen in the past is somebody's typing in an item number. They're thinking that it's an item number, and it sure looks like one when you put it on a sales order. But if you type in a line type that has an inventory interface of N, then it's not going to validate that item against the item master. Okay, so you can mistype it and it's not going to error. Okay, you think that you're adjusting inventory, but you are not, right? It all depends on the line type. So just remember that. That works the same in purchasing and sales. Okay, whether this inventory interface is turned on or not. Okay, so we can either get the GL class code from the item location or the fold of the line type. That's an old terminology, but basically it means this GL class code that you see on the setup screen. Okay, The other codes, this will use account information that's entered directly on the purchase order. This is purchase direct to accounts. Okay, so you would need a GL class code and DMAAIs for that. Okay, so here's my last poll question. If I have a purchase order and the inventory interface of the line type is set to N, where is the GL class code going to come from? So let me go ahead and launch this one. Okay, so we have our choices are the location file. It's going to come right from the item master, the purchase order line, the line type setup, or none of them. Okay, so let's see. I'll give this about another 30 seconds or so. Let's see, yep, we're almost there. And let's say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good. Wow. The vast majority of you were correct. This is going to come from the line type setup. Okay. It's set to an N, so no inventory interface. So that automatically rules out the numbers 1 and 2 right here. Okay, so the line type setup, it's going to default that into the purchase order, and then that is what's going to get used. Very good, very good. Okay, let me give you a couple helpful tips. I use this method all the time when I'm asked to review DMAAIs for our customers. I use something called the model table concept. And what the model table concept is we're going to pick and focus on one DMAAI table. Now, here's another chart that looks like an eye chart, but what you can see is these are just a basic listing of, these are the 4 modules again with their system codes next to them. Okay, the standard types that are normally used, the list of DMAAI tables that could be invoked, and an X means where each of the document types should be set up. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking at here for a chart. You can see that there are lots of DMAAI tables, and there are a lot more than what are listed here. These are the main ones. And here, what we have is for 4152 document type PI, I'm going to designate that as what's called a model table. So inside of that model table, what we do is we look at the setup. We look at all the companies, all the GL class codes that are in there for the one document type PI. Now, the reason that I picked this one is because if you have inventory in your system that you're managing, chances are at some point you're going to count it. So when you count it, you have to have this DMAAI set up. So this seems to me like a very good place to start. So what we do is we vet that one out. We dump the listing out, we go into Edwards, export it to Excel, and we scrutinize that one with a magnifying glass. And we say, yes, for this GL class code, this is the balance sheet account that I want. And we go through all companies, all GL class codes, all accounts, and make sure that we are happy with those results. Once we get that done and that's vetted, then what we can do is start comparing it to all of these other DMAAI tables that are shown in green here. These are the inventory side of the transactions. So for example, for our inventory adjustment, we use 4122 as the inventory side, 4124 is the expense side. So what we're trying to do is to keep our inventory accounts straight. We want to take an inventory model table and make sure that all these other ones look like this. Now, this is a 99.1% type rule. There are on occasion some tricks that people do with transactions to get the accounting to do certain things, and there's nothing wrong with that. but the vast majority of the time that these tables are going to look exactly like the model. So for example, if I have a geo class code that I've deemed to be a finished good, and let's just say it's FG01 for finished goods, and I put it in here, when I cycle count it, the account number next to it is going to be the finished goods account on the balance sheet. And I make sure that it's there. Well, you may never do this, but if I take that FG01 and I look in 3110, which is material usage, right? I'm issuing it to a work order. Would I ever issue finished goods to a work order? I might, probably not, but I might, okay? If I were to do that, and there's an FG01 in this table, what should the account be? I should be crediting my finished goods account. A lot of times what will happen, especially when people use wildcards, is that they'll put a wildcard entry in here saying, oh, it's just material issued to a work order, that's raw material. So let me just throw in the asterisk and company 0, and we'll put in the raw material account, and we'll just let everything go there, right? Because we know that. I don't want to put in all these different entries. I'll just put in one and call it a day. Okay, well, that is a big mistake, okay? If I have an item that's a finished good, we are saying that all the debits and credits, no matter what transaction type I do, should come in and out of the finished goods account for that item. So it doesn't matter if I receive it in. If I'm purchasing a finished goods, I want to debit the finished goods account. If I ship it out, I want to credit the finished goods account. If I want to adjust it, anything to do with that item should come in and out of the finished goods account. That's what the model table concept does. I look at it, I vet this out. If it's finished goods, it says finished goods here. It better say finished goods in all these other places. Now, this comes into play particularly when you are trying to reconcile inventory. Okay, DMAAIs and errors in DMAAI setup is the biggest contributor to reconciling items in a JD Edwards by far. So it really behooves you to make sure that these setups are the way you want them. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about debugging. So there's two transaction types I'm going to refer to. They're interactive and batch. Interactive are the ones you do on an Edwards screen. Like I'll do a purchase order receipt on an Edwards screen. I'll do an inventory adjustment on an Edwards screen. When I do those, and there's a DMAAI that is an issue behind the scenes, you will see an error right in front of you as you're doing the transaction. And that error will take the form of the picture that you see here. You can see the error message here. It says this form has one error, okay? And it tells you which AAI number. In this case, we were doing an inventory adjustment, an IA. You can see the document type here. Okay, the DMAAI was not set up correctly for this item. Okay, it's not defined, it says. And it'll say check information for company, or document type, and geo class code. So it tells you that there's a problem. And now interactive transactions, you cannot complete the transaction unless the DMAAIs have been set up, okay? Now, next is, or I should say, are the batch jobs. Batch jobs, there are two of them in particular, manufacturing, accounting, and sales update, that create the journal entries. So if I issue material to a work order, and I do that, let's say at 10 o'clock in the morning, yes, my inventory on hand will change right then, but it's not looking at DMAAIs. It doesn't look at DMAAIs until I run manufacturing accounting late at night. Same with sales orders. I can ship confirm all day long. I don't care about DMAAIs until I run sales update later that day. Okay, so that's what I mean by batch. These are jobs that run on the schedule. They're not transactions that are being keyed in directly on an Edwards screen, okay? And they get kicked off usually in a job scheduler, let's say, you know, late night, early in the morning, that type of thing. When those jobs run and you find it, and there are DMAAI errors, there's nobody around because there's no screen, there's no red light that flashes in front of you to say there's an error, but what there is is there's an exception report that comes out on these different jobs. So you can see an example of it here. Here's the one for the 31802A, and it's telling us, here's the AAI number. We have a problem with GL category G08 in these particular cost types. And look what it says for the error. Please refer to your work center for details. Now, if you go into the work center, you will see these batches that have failed, and then it will actually give you details about why they failed. Okay, so a lot of times when I talk to people, they don't know that these error reports exist. So they'll just run their jobs at night assuming everything is processing fully, but when in fact you can have DMAAI errors holding things up. Okay, so make sure on the batch jobs that somebody's monitoring the results for these two programs, and that way, you know, you can save yourself a lot of grief when it comes time to reconciling. Okay, now what I want to do real quick is I want to introduce RapidReconciler to you. There's a reason for this, and it does pertain to the DMAAIs that we're talking about. But what RapidReconciler is, it's our Oracle validated solution that assists in reconciling the perpetual inventory, your STOTs for goods in transit, as well as your received not vouchered. Okay, and some of the benefits of using this, right, number one here is looking for those mismatched DMAAIs. So what we've done is we've built integrity reports in, and I'll show them to you in a couple minutes, of that model table concept. We've built it in, and we have already do the compare to all the other DMAAIs, and we will show them to you, sort them all out for you to let you know if there are inconsistencies, as well as other things such as, you know, geo class codes. Do they match up between your item branch and your item location records? Do we have frozen cost issues? We provide some back-end process reporting to make sure that all of your transactions are making it all the way through to the GL and actually invoking the DMAAIs and making it to the books. Okay, and we also use a transaction-based inventory strategy. We do not use the JD Edwards as of table. Okay, so for that, let me just go in and I want to show you briefly what RapidReconciler looks like. It is a web-based program. Here's what it is with some test data. You can see we have two companies here, 10 and 50. These are the inventory accounts that we pulled from the model table, right? So we go into 4152 PI, we look for all the business units, objects, and subsidiaries, we pull them out, and these are what's deemed to be your inventory accounts. Now we can go ahead and reconcile, get as detailed as we want just by using the checkboxes. So if I want to just look at raw materials, I can just look at raw materials. And notice that our reconciliation is pretty darn good. Okay, we had 3 cents of variance. So we can see here that it's pretty much flatline. So this account month over month stays perfectly in balance. So why does it stay perfectly in balance? Well, there's other things built in here that help identify reconciling items, the causes, and we provide the corrective actions. So one of those things are these integrity reports that we built in that I was mentioning. So first 3 I'll talk about, these have to do with the DMAAIs. So if I look here, we produce a report of your JD Edwards DMAAIs. We pull them out, we categorize them, what module they're in, whether they're expense or inventory. Here's the table numbers, whether you use flex accounting or not, where the flex comes from, what fields, so you can see everything right here in one report. And I use this all the time for debugging transactions that are failing because of DMAAIs. Okay, then the second one is the model table. So we go into table 4152, and in our case, we set up a specific doc type 99 just for RapidReconciler. Here are the geo class codes that we use. Here are the balance sheet accounts. Vet it out. That's what it looks like. And then we go to the entry integrity where we do the compare to all the other ones. And we find, oh, if I do this transaction, this IA on this geo class, it's a net 0. Meaning that these two accounts and these two DMAAI tables are the same. So nothing's happening on the GL if I do this transaction. Is that really what you want? The object account is mismatched. The subsidiaries could be mismatched. Net zero. So we go through and we produce the list of all potential AAI problems. And in addition to that, if you use wildcards, we will unravel them and make a full listing. So you could come in here and say, oh, I have a problem in 4122. I look for an IA. I look for GL class PLAT, and I don't find it. And you're saying, but RapidReconciler said that it's an error. And I'll say, yes, but do you have an asterisk in there? Your asterisk is causing this to fail. You're going to want to make a discrete entry for PLAT so that you don't cause problems. Okay, so that's how you use these integrity reports. And there are others that aren't DMAAI related exactly. For example, geo class integrity. This is where your branch doesn't match your location for geo class codes, right? And you might say, well, what does that have to do with DMAAIs? Well, the geo class code that you actually use, right, determines which DMAAIs are used. So geo class codes are important in this exercise. So we are going to want to make sure that we are in sync with them in the different locations. Okay, so basically that's the part of RapidReconciler I wanted to show you today. We do have it built in to do a lot of this DMAAI integrity check processing that I've been talking about this afternoon. So with that, let me turn it back over to Brooke, and then we will open it up for some questions.
Great, thank you so much, Ed. Let me just share my screen with you and let me know when you can see it.
I can see it now, Brooke.
Awesome, thank you so much. All right, well, thank you so much for that great presentation, Ed, and the demo. I would just like to cover a few follow-up items, and then we will move into our question and answer portion of the webcast. Today's webcast is part of our free ongoing educational webcast series for JD Edwards. And our upcoming webcasts are currently listed on the screen. And as I said earlier, we are adding new ones every day, so check back often. And we provide free, extensive educational resources for the JD Edwards community, including our weekly educational webcasts, our monthly newsletter called the GSI Insider, and our online resource center where you can access on-demand webcasts, white papers, and so much more. And we also offer on-site and virtual workshops. Now, if you'd like to sign up for our weekly email reminders for upcoming webcasts, our monthly newsletter, or to create an account to access our resource center, you can go to getgsi.com, click on resources and events on the main menu, and then you can select JD Edwards on right under resources and events. All right. And also we have a problem-solving collaboration site called ERP Talk, where you can get all of your questions answered, not just for JD Edwards, but other enterprise software as well. And be sure to keep up with us on social media. All of our handles are currently listed on the screen. You can see our most up-to-date posts on webcasts, events, industry insights, and a lot more as well. All right, well, I see that we do have a few questions here. And I would just like to remind you that if you would like to submit a question, you can do so through the questions panel in the GoToWebinar console window on the right side of your screen. And if you minimized your console earlier, please just click the left-facing arrow key to redisplay the questions panel. All right, Ed, are you ready?
I am ready.
Perfect. Okay, our first question comes from Mark, and he says, can you explain the model table concept again?
Sure. What we use, I don't know if you're familiar with a term the finance people use, they call the model chart of accounts, where it's basically a template. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have a good relationship between company number, document type, geo class code, and inventory balance sheet account. So the model table concept is basically we're building a cross-reference that we can say we have geo classes that are raw materials, we have some that are sub-assemblies, we have some that are finished goods. So we want to know which ones are which, and the model table concept does that. So there are many DMAAI tables in JD Edwards. So what we want to do is we want to narrow our focus to one of them to vet that out and then compare it to the rest of the tables so we make sure that everything is lined up correctly.
Okay, great. All right, we have another question. And I'm sorry if I butcher your name. It's Madhavan, and he says, is RapidReconciler a separate product?
Yes, RapidReconciler is a product that we offer. It does copy data from JD Edwards, and we do a reconciliation offline. We don't change any information inside of JD Edwards. So we do have the ability to provide demos on that. So if you want to reach out to us, we can certainly set something up and go through that with you.
Great, thank you so much. All right, and we have another question here. Sorry, it's getting cut off on my screen. Okay, so next question is from Satish, and they ask, we have a scenario where we are using STOT to transfer product from several source branches into a single destination branch. We then sell the item on an SO to the customer. We want to allocate revenue and COGs back to the appropriate source branch. And then it gets cut off, so I can't.
Yeah, I can see it, Brooke. It says, yeah, it says using the DMAAI, is this possible? I believe that it is possible. That's a pretty specific scenario. I'm going to assume that all of these branches are within the same company, because if they're cross companies, it gets a little bit more complicated. But if they're within the same company, then yes, I believe that there is a flex accounting setup that you can use. You might have to set up item branch plant category codes, like to say, here's the source branch, and create a category code that way, and then flex in the actual branch number or category code number from those records from the item branch. So is it possible? I believe it is possible. It's a little complicated, so it would take some time and some testing to actually do it, but yes, I believe it's possible.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And our next question we have comes from Molly, and she says, we have multiple instances of JDE. How would RapidReconciler handle that? Okay,
multiple instances of JDE to me means like you might have one separate database for, let's say, European facilities versus a different instance in North America. With RapidReconciler, it can handle that, but what we must do is we must have one RapidReconciler database per instance of JD Edwards. So in that case, there would be 2 or more, depending on how many instances you're talking about. But yeah, it's a one-to-one relationship.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That appears to be the end of our questions for today. I want to thank everybody for your questions and for attending, and thank you, Ed, for your great presentation and answering all of our questions. And as a follow-up from today's webcast, we ask that you complete a short 1-minute survey when you exit, and you will be receiving an email with a link to our resource center on our website where you can access the recording from today's webcast as well as a copy of the presentation. And after today's webcast, we will do the drawing for the $25 Amazon gift card, and anyone that attended the entire webcast will be eligible, and we will notify the winner. Now, if you have any follow-up questions, you can contact Ed or myself as well as Bill Craig, and we will be able to get back with you. And our contact info is currently listed on the screen. And we would like to thank you again for your time today. And thanks again, Ed, for your presentation. And we hope that you have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Brooke.
Thanks.